The puck is set to drop on Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. But before we get there, we're taking a look at some fantasy pieces in need of a change on the Tuesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's 200 bones in bonus bets with any winning $5 wager. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Steele, we're not here without the everydayers. You know I got to drop them their shout out, holding us down every single day, making us your first listen. Got to get that love out there, Steele. Game 5 back in Florida. I think you and I are on the same page. We'll get to the Game 5, same game parlays at the end of the episode. But look, July 1st, free agency is looming. A number of pieces on a number of rosters. I think it's clear to say with a change of scenery, we might see a little boost in fantasy value. So I'm intrigued to hear what players you're looking at that you think, number one, need a change of scenery and what that might mean for their fantasy value coming up for next season.
Yeah, I've got a lot of names here, and I'm going to get to the first guy I want to talk about, and maybe it might be a surprise for you, but his name has been out there on the trade block, and he could be an asset in a trade come free agency and looking to acquire defensemen for the Winnipeg Jets. So I'm looking at Nikolai Ehlers for a change of scenery right now from the Winnipeg Jets. His name has been out there since they were eliminated in the first round against the Colorado Avalanche. This is a team that desperately needs a top 4 defenseman right now. And especially when you look at what happened in the first round, they desperately need a top 4 defenseman in their lineup. And Nikolai Ehlers brings that trading piece into acquiring one of the top ones in the NHL right now. And just looking what he was capable of doing, he didn't really perform in the playoffs, only 2 assists in 5 games in round 1. But when you look at it, what he did in the regular season, 61 points in 82 games while playing under 16 minutes of average ice time.
True.
One of his best career seasons, his second best year in the NHL behind a 64-point season in 82 games back in 2016. So he dominated offensively, 61 points in 82 games, 233 shots on net, 39 blocks, 30 hits, 29 penalty minutes, a plus 27 as well. So there's another peripheral stat that kind of jumps off the page at you. And Nikolai Ehlers can bring a very balanced attack to another team in the top 6 forward group and get a little bit more ice time. This is a guy that really hasn't gotten more than over 16 and a half minutes of average ice time throughout his career, only a few seasons. 2021, the 2021 season where he got over 18 minutes of average ice time, and back in that 2016 season where he averaged 17 and a half. So this is a player who's 28 years old. He's in his prime. When he's healthy, he plays very good hockey, and he's a great fantasy value piece to any GM out there on their fantasy team.
I think the angle with this player over at least the last 2 years before this season was his inability to stay in the lineup. He almost seemingly, I think it was 2016. I forget his injuries, but it was one after another, it felt like. And we were expecting a big season from him after 55 points in 62 games. I know he was up there as fantasy disappointments in 2023. However, this angle you're discussing with more minutes, and we know that's a balanced attack in Winnipeg, sometimes hard to find the minutes up front with so many good forwards in the mix. I love this one, Steele. This is perfect, prototypical, fits the mold. You knocked it out of the park on the first one. Let me get to my first guy, because also let me just pop off, because we're keeping today, perhaps for once and for all, Steele, short and sweet, baby. We try and get you guys in and out in 30 minutes or less, giving you all the news that you need. And of course, we're wrapping up today's episode with bets. Make sure you tap in for the top 15 D-men countdown. It's coming this week. We promised it, and it's coming. Is Tyler Bertuzzi, Steele? Because I know he ended up finishing with 21 goals and 43 points. I actually, when I think about Tyler Bertuzzi and what he can bring to the table by bringing some sandpaper, by bringing a little bit of edge, getting into the dirty areas, chipping in with goals, and being a bit of a disturber for the opposition. Shout out to the Guelph Storm, by the way. Through the first 51 games of last season, he had 5 goals. And then he turned it on. He was you and I talked about it. Was he a Boston Bruin double agent placement?
I thought so.
He was invisible, though, for like the first 2 months. He was absolutely nowhere. And I just don't think the experiment with the Toronto Maple Leafs worked out. Am I saying they aren't going to try and still bring him back? I think it's already been rumored that Treliving would like to have him back at the right price. I think every GM has to say that. I just don't think it's right. I think he needs to shift off to another team. I think he needs to start fresh. It didn't really work out in Toronto. During that time period as well, Steele, over that first 51 games, we were just talking about ice time, he was only able to snag 15 minutes of ice time per night. I think it's the same thing. He needs a little bit more opportunity, a change of scenery, and I think he can return to that season. What did he put up? 62 points in 68 games for the Detroit Red Wings, scoring 30 goals. I think he is much more of a 55 to 60 point player than what he did this year, which was 40. I think a change of scenery, you're going to see a boost in his fantasy value. And for me, if I'm Tyler Bertuzzi, it didn't work out in Toronto. Now you're going to potentially maybe even lose Mitch. That teeth, that attack in Toronto might even be a little bit less what it is. I don't know. If I'm Tyler Bertuzzi, I'm thinking a change of scenery might be exactly what I need, although he has had a few of those recently.
I'm right there with you. I think a change of scenery for Tyler Bertuzzi is optimum for both himself and the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. And I'm going to throw this name out there as well, because I think this would be a perfect swap to fill in that position for Tyler Bertuzzi. And I talked about him a few episodes ago, or a few weeks ago on an episode, and it's Max Pacioretty. Max Pacioretty to me still brings a ton of fantasy value when he's
you've been on this
in the lineup. He, of course, obviously, you got to be a little bit scared, a little bit worrisome about the back-to-back torn Achilles from Max Pacioretty with the Carolina Hurricanes, with the Washington Capitals, the injuries that he has suffered throughout the last few seasons. But Max Pacioretty is another player who needs a change of scenery. This guy is not getting any younger. He's 35, 36 years old, still yet to win a Stanley Cup in his NHL career, and he's got a ring chase right now. What better team to do it with than the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are almost getting there and almost over that hump? They just need a couple more veterans. They need some star power. They need their superstar players to perform in the playoffs. And Max Pacioretty is not going to cost as much as Tyler Bertuzzi. Tyler Bertuzzi is looking for $5-6 million. Max Pacioretty, you can probably get him for $1.5-2 million on a 1-year deal. Put him in the top 6, put him in the bottom 6. Who cares? Max Pacioretty is a guy who brings tons of fantasy value. He brings the points when he's healthy. He brings the shots on net, and he's a little bit easy. He brings the physicality as well. I love Max Pacioretty, but you do have to be worrisome about the injuries. But of course, I see the value, and I'm staying on Max Pacioretty this season.
Look, I'm writing this one down because it's a bold take. It's a deep cut. I like all the angles you're mentioning, and I think what is the most attractive to me, fantasy-wise, obviously, is a much different thing, but in terms of what he's able to bring to the table for a team like the Maple Leafs, if that's what we're going to say hypothetically, is that his price tag will be so low. It's almost like a buy low situation with a high ceiling for an opportunity for some payout. Fantasy-wise, I would be looking at him much more carefully and maybe on just a week-to-week fill-in basis. However, we're going to fill in the rest of today's episode right around the break. I got a couple more players that I think, Steele, are still fantasy draftable, and with a change of scenery, their stock goes up. We also got some same-game parlays to get to because tonight in South Florida, it's popping off, Steele, and I'm excited to hear who it is that you're riding with. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summertime means baseball and, of course, NBA Finals and a whole lot more, and you can bet on it all at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who hits a dinger right out of the park. FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, follow button, and leave a 5-star review. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today. They also are here for you 24/7, bringing you the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single show, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Flip, I got two more players. One of them, I'm going to make it very, very short, but I want to start off this second segment, continuing the conversation, though, with Martin Necas of the Carolina Hurricanes, because his name has been out there on the trade block as well. His name has been out there as a free agency signing that most likely won't re-sign with the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm not exactly sure what the turmoil and what the problem is between Necas's camp and the organization of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, his name's been out there.
They don't seem to want to re-sign him. Necas doesn't want to re-sign with Carolina. It seems like there's a lot going on in the rumor mill with this player, but another guy that I believe could do a lot more in a different organization. 53 points in 77 games this past year with the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously a down season from the year prior to where he had 71 points in 82 games, but he still brings the penalty minutes. He brings the shots on net, back-to-back seasons with 230 plus shots on net. The physicality continues to grow in his game, 77 hits, 31 blocks. He didn't get enough ice time as the year prior. Last year, he had 18 and a half minutes of average ice time. This year, he had less than 17 and a half minutes of average ice time. And that does make a big difference when you're playing this game in the top six forward group. And yeah, he missed 5 games with injury, but he still played 77 games. For me personally, this 25-year-old, I'm not sure exactly what type of contract, what type of money annually he's looking for. Maybe he thinks he's worth more than he is. I believe his last contract was $6 million or $5 million for the Carolina Hurricanes.
I'll check it for you. I got you.
Maybe he's looking for 7.5. I'm not sure if he's really worth that much after a down season like this. But Martin Necas is a type of player who has the skill set to bring a ton of fantasy value to your fantasy team this next season. And if you can draft him in the proper round and get him maybe as a steal later in the draft, I'm looking more like the 10th round, 9th round for a guy like Martin Necas right now. Anything past that, it's an absolute steal. But he brings a ton of fantasy value because of the peripherals that he fills out and the potential of what he can do offensively. Back-to-back seasons with 25 plus goals. Again, back-to-back seasons of 50 plus points. He's still only 25 years old. There's a lot to prove, and there's a lot showcasing of what he's capable of doing at the NHL level in the top six forward group.
I think he's, at $4.3 million on a 3-year deal. He's an RFA, so there's obviously that caveat to be juggled. I think he has all kinds of upside. He was the 12th player off the board in the 2017 draft. He's an excellent skater. He's a good playmaker. He needs to be a bit more selfish and shoot that puck a lot more, because I think if he does that, obviously the value goes up. I think he's probably looking in and around 6.5. He's probably wanting maybe even more, perhaps. So that could also be, that's a good point on your behalf. At 6'2", though, Steele, I want to see him use his frame a little bit more. And I think if you combine that with being a bit more selfish, along with his skating ability and playmaking skills, you have a pretty elite cocktail there for a fantasy piece that can put up some points. So
9 points in 11 games in the playoffs this past season too. So he's performed in both playoffs. Actually, every single playoff season he's been with the Carolina Hurricanes, he's performed. So I'm not sure what's going on between those two camps right now.
And that is definitely a big time negotiating chip at the bargaining table to get him his money. So maybe that's what's holding them up. However, we're going to keep rolling on today's episode. I got 2 more players. I got a same game parlay ready to pop off. Elias Lindholm, last year, it was a bit of a disappointing year, both in Calgary and in Vancouver. And there's a lot of rumors out there around this Vancouver team in general. Pettersson, Lindholm, does he want to stay in Vancouver at all? I know a lot of the NHL experts out there are leaning towards he actually doesn't want to stay in Vancouver. So when I hear that, obviously that could be a rumor. It could not be true. When I hear that, when I hear how he performed, when I look at how he performed in his 26 games there, only 12 points in 26 games, Steele, 6 goals, 6 assists. But even in Calgary this year, 32 points in 49 games, only 9 goals, when a couple of years ago, Steele, he had 42 goals for the Calgary Flames in 2022 in an 82-point season. This is a guy who's hovered around 80 points before in his career, and I think a change of scenery going into his age 30 season here, Steele, he's not a young whippersnapper anymore. I think he's looking at this next opportunity as the last couple of real good chances before he hits the wily veteran stage to go at a cup. And when I've seen what Elias Lindholm can do on the ice, a very smart, responsible player that can really chip in across the board. Obviously, you're not drafting him for his physicality, but his offensive ability makes him a draftable player most definitely. If he goes to a team that is a bit loaded up front offensively, and I'm not trying to take away anything from a good Vancouver Canucks team, Steele, I'm really taking a look at Elias Lindholm because of how he performed for Vancouver. You were talking about bargains. You might be able to get Elias Lindholm a little bit down the board, and maybe he should be because of how he performed. But if he goes to this change of scenery angle like we're talking about, I think he is the perfect candidate to see him have a little bit of a bounce back.
Might be a very good fit, and I'm just throwing this out there now that I'm thinking about it, but maybe a very good fit for the Boston Bruins playing on that top line with David Pastrnak, Jake DeBrusk, or Brad Marchand.
I could see it. I think that's been out there. That rumor's been out there.
Yeah, that's been out there, but they definitely need the help down the center position. You can't rely too much on the center depth that they have right now. Pavel Zacha is the number one guy. I just don't see that. Again, we've talked at length about it, but Elias Lindholm, definitely a lot of fantasy value going out there, just needs to land with the right team. And very surprising that he didn't perform as well once traded to the Vancouver Canucks. I think he got 2 goals in his first game with the Canucks, and then after that, it was downhill trajectory from there. He basically, I think he had 3 more points in the next 20 games. So a lot missed out on that opportunity with the Vancouver Canucks this season, but he's probably looking for a change of scenery again after being with 2 Canadian teams. Maybe it's time to go down to the United States for Elias Lindholm, but I'm just going to mention this guy real quick.
Sure.
I just want to throw his name out there because he's still under contract for the next 2 seasons. He will be an RFA, I believe, once the contract is over. But Trevor Zegras of the Anaheim Ducks.
I have him too, Steele.
Yeah, I had to throw his name out there just because I think, honestly, it's more about the Anaheim Ducks organization at this point than it is for Trevor Zegras. I think he's just become a distraction for them. This team is a very, very young team. They do have a lot of draft picks. They've got a lot of young depth, a lot of young players and young prospects in their roster or upcoming into their roster right now. And over the last 2 seasons, honestly, Trevor Zegras has been a little bit of a distraction, especially this last year with all the injuries that he's been through and being out of the lineup. 15 points in 31 games, 30 penalty minutes, 73 shots in those 31 games, 16 hits, 15 blocks. There's a lot of fantasy value to be had. This guy, again, if he can play a full 82 games, just the 2 seasons prior, he went 61 points and then 65 points back-to-back seasons with a very terrible Anaheim Ducks team. If he were to be traded, regardless if he remains with the Ducks, regardless if he gets traded, no matter what, he's going to bring a ton of fantasy value still because of the skill set that he has. But there needs to be a change in his game. I'm all for the Michigans. I'm all for the creativity. I'm all for it, but you got to be a team player at the same time. You got to be doing the two-way forward. Obviously, I'm not going to compare him to the best two-way forward in the game, Alexander Barkov, out there right now.
Whoa.
But there's a lot that needs to develop in this young man's game. And obviously, right now, it's all offensive-based, and that's great fantasy value-wise. But if we're talking just generic NHL hockey right now, what needs to be done on a 200-foot game, there's a lot to be developed for Trevor Zegras. So I had to throw his name out there, but still, skill set is undeniable. The creativity is incredible. What he's capable of doing with the puck and setting up his teammates in the offensive zone is very impressive. Again, young player, lots to learn, lots to develop into his game. But Trevor Zegras, he's going to fall down the draft board a lot because of what we saw this past year. Big time. Struggled at the beginning of the season. Struggled once he was healthy, and then struggled to be healthy. So I think his name will fall down the draft board quite a bit, and he's going to be a steal for you to pick up.
Only 23 years old. Obviously, this seems like a situation where it's a lot between the ears for Trevor Zegras, and perhaps his approach to handling himself on the ice, some very questionable ways that he has gone about handling himself. Little bit of a whiny baby situation going on here from what I'm seeing on the ice, Steele, but the offensive upside, the elite offensive potential for fantasy value is clearly there. I love this angle of a change of scenery. Drop a couple of honorable mentions in Patrick Laine, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Those are the ones that everyone out there knows about. I thought about maybe Jake DeBrusk. That's been a name that I know the Bruins can't afford to get rid of forwards, but he's been a little bit buried there. We kept thinking Jake DeBrusk is going to have a bit of a step out. He's been hovering around this 40-point mark. I was going to throw him in there for honorable mention. We got tea times to make, baby, and we got same-game parlays coming up. Show some love, and let's get this paper.
Same game parlay right after the break. You know how it is, but first, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Flip Game 5 action of the Stanley Cup Finals between the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers. I've got a same-game parlay. You've got a same-game parlay. And we alluded to this just a few episodes ago or last episode that it's over. We thought it was over in Game 4. Obviously,
we were wrong.
Oilers put an 8 spot on them, but it's going back to Florida now. It's over. So enough alluding to it. I'll throw it over to you. What's your same-game parlay?
We just got to say it. Paul Maurice's teams, not only do they bounce back from losses, they rarely get embarrassed in back-to-back games. Does that mean the Edmonton Oilers can't win tonight? Of course not, especially when you have everything that went right for them in the previous game. However, Sergei Bobrovsky doesn't usually get embarrassed back-to-back games either. They're back home. They have the cup in the building, and they just need to play even a little bit closer to how they did over the first 3 games, and I really do think that this one's done tonight, Steele. I was really happy for the Oilers fans. I said that. I'm glad they got a dub. However, where is my FanDuel tab? There it is. Panthers on the money line. And I'm just going to spit this out real quick. Leon Draisaitl in back-to-back games has had 3 or more shots. You're going to see the best from the best on the Edmonton Oilers. I just don't think it's good enough. So I'm really comfortable with Leon Draisaitl at minus 125 for 3 or more shots. I think that is a steal of an odd. That's my lock of the night. And I'm going to parlay that with Steele under 6.5. That's going to get you a parlay odd of plus 385. So I'm pretty comfortable with that payout. And I really do like all 3 of those picks. However, if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan and you're a little bit rattled about taking the Panthers, respect, take that one off. Draisaitl, 3 or more shots. That one's Uncle Flip's free loot pick of the night. But those are my 3 picks.
Absolutely love all 3 of those picks. I am kind of switching around the over-under on you a little bit, but it still might pan out for the both of us.
I like it.
I am also taking the Leon 3+ shots in this matchup.
Yes,
I believe he is going to be firing on all cylinders. I think we're going to see a lot more from Connor McDavid in the top 6 group of the Edmonton Oilers as well. But Leon Draisaitl is going to be shooting that puck because he got shut out in the first 3 games. He scored a beauty, I believe, in Game 4. He's going to continue shooting that puck in Game 5.
He almost
so
did. He had
shots.
2 assists.
Almost. Oh yeah, Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman got that one, or Nugent Hopkins. It was crazy what happened on that sequence there.
He was playing better, Steele. That's all that matters.
He was playing better. But 3+ shots for Leon Draisaitl is the first pick. Second pick, Carter Verhaeghe anytime goal is my second pick of the night. He has been Mr. Clutch for the Florida Panthers over the last 3 seasons. 7 game-winning goals in the regular season, but he has 10 game-winning goals in the last 3 postseason runs with the Florida Panthers. He's been Mr. Clutch. He's been a bona fide superstar for them. One of the ones that got away from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that is my second pick and my third pick. I'm going to take the over 5.5 in this matchup. I think we're going to see a little bit of a barn burner game, a tight game, but a barn burner of one because of what's on the line for both these teams. One win away from winning the Stanley Cup, and the Edmonton Oilers do or die time. So again, I think we're going to be seeing firing on all cylinders for both teams, but those are my 3 picks. Leon Draisaitl, 3+ shots, Carter Verhaeghe, anytime goal, and the over 5.5 in this matchup.
Hey, if you're going anywhere, I think we're both clearly on the same Leon Draisaitl train.
Yeah.
Hey, Cup's in the building, Steele. Game 5. I'm excited to see what goes down. I just want to see a good game. If we see a 1-0 or a 2-1 snoozer, it's going to be tough for this man to stay up all night.
Yeah.
You know what I would also sprinkle, though? If I was just making like a $5 or a $10 fun parlay, and we'll just wrap it up with this, I'd be taking overtime. I think this one is going to be, like you said, even if it is a barn burner, it's going to be very close. You're going to get a bunch of juice for that. Slap that one on there and thank us later.
Very close indeed. Those are all the picks. Those are the lock of the night. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, go check out Locked On Sports Days, first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So make sure you go subscribe. You can also check it out on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.